Hi, this is Mark News from Plant Talk Radio. Thanks for subscribing and listening to our podcast, Your Gardening Questions from Plant Talk Radio. If you have a gardening question you'd like our host Fred Howard to answer, send him an email. The email address is fred@planttalkradio.com. Now for today's question. Fred, when it comes to the bulbs, I know that you have here something I have never really thought about with the bulbs. I kind of like let them do their thing and walk away, but you say to deadhead them.
Well, yes, Mark, and I did then put a line there and say, if practical. Now, if you have 500 bulbs, you can still do it. But if you have 50 or less, with your thumbnail or a small pair of pruners, you can snip off those flower heads. Because what has happened is the norm. The flower comes out, it attracts bees, they get pollinated, and then that little fat part right below the flower or at the base of the flower is the ovule. It sets seed. And it takes energy from the plant for it to do that. It isn't a big deal. I don't know how much energy they would be, so to speak, using that way. But if you have a few or the ambition to be out in the sun on a nice day, do snap those heads off. Now, not the whole stem. The stem itself, the flower stem, is green and will pick up light and make food. But just the very top, which is maybe an inch and a half, snap them off with your fingernail, a thumbnail if you have it, which I don't have one big enough, small pruners, whatever. You can actually sometimes twist and pull a little bit. Not so hard as to yank the bulb out of the ground. But that will all add to the rebuilding process. And therefore, it stretches your investment for all practical purposes. Leaving the foliage on so the bulb can remake itself thoroughly, taking the seed head off. You can take your 50-cent bulb that would normally go away 25 cents a year and make it a dime a year so that you can get a given bulb, most especially the daffodils, to regenerate. Now, the tulip doesn't usually get enough brilliant sun and so on in Ohio, often enough, long enough in a day to make food to continue as long as a daffodil will. Some daffodils are 15, 20 years old. Sometimes they get so thick that they kind of hamper each other's growth. And then you can dig and divide and reset the big ones. At that point, though, I'd be inclined to buy new varieties and so on. But in any event, right now, for those of us that put them in to extend their beauty over the years, do leave the foliage, do fertilize the plants or the plant area, and then, as I say, if practical, time-wise or back-wise, snip the tips off of that flower head and do all you can to get them to be as big and beautiful next year as they were this year.
You know, I have one clump of daffodils that come up in a perfect circle every year. The green comes up beautiful, and you're just that hope. Yeah. You know, you get that green, you're like, okay, spring's around the corner. Right. I get maybe 3 flowers. They all droop over as soon as they come on the stem, and that's it.
Well, Mark, I think it's time for you to invest because when you dig them, if you dig them, you're probably going to find a bulb that's less than an inch in diameter, and probably packed right against the one next to it. And they're just simply competing with each other at that point. You can... And I know people that have done it, dig the whole clump, at least take the biggest new small bulbs and plant them out in a secondary position, let them regrow for 2 or 3 years and become a more full-size bulb being spaced out. But that's a little bit of a time trial for me.
Now, mine are probably no more than a foot or two away from the base of a tree. Do you think maybe there's some competition there with the roots? I should just move them?
Yeah, I would. And it's okay to plant daffodils in a floor of a woods where you know they're going to be in some competition. But when they're that close and probably that old, I would say it's time to find a new home for them. Because when any plant competes with a larger tree, the tree is going to win, period. Either by causing a shortage of light or root competition or nutrient competition or all three. And you just have to start out knowing that the plants that you put under a big tree are going to need some special help. Like, it can work. There are lots of things that do work in that kind of a situation, but you got to give them a little help because that big old tree says it's mine.
Hey, thanks again for listening to our podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our other podcasts as well, the Plant of the Week podcast and the Plant Talk Radio podcast, all on iTunes or your favorite podcast player. If you'd like to sponsor a daily podcast, contact us at fred@planttalkradio.com. To find out more about Fred Hauer and Plant Talk Radio, visit our website, planttalkradio.com.
Circle270media.com